Have you ever walked into a workplace and just felt this immediate crackling energy? You know, that sense that everyone is just naturally on the exact same wavelength? Well, you might have chalked it up to luck, thinking, wow, they just have great chemistry. But what if I told you that workplace engagement isn't just a lucky roll of the dice? What if it is, quite literally, a science? Today we're unpacking a really fascinating source document that outlines a specific behavioral science module. We're going to look at the exact psychological toolkit this module uses to turn abstract workplace dynamics into a predictable, manageable science. So this really begs a fascinating question. Can workplace chemistry actually be manufactured? Like, can we as professionals actively engineer the connections we feel at work rather than just crossing our fingers and hoping they happen naturally? Okay, let's dive into this. The source document we're analyzing today argues a resounding yes to that question. In fact, its stated purpose is to help participants engage and create a relationship with one another. Notice the active verbs right there. It's not about just passively watching relationships form. It's about giving you the tools to intentionally engage and deliberately create those bonds. It's a completely active, structured process. To understand exactly how this works, here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The chemistry of engagement. 2. The push and pull equation. 3. The psychological toolkit. 4. Formulating positive outcomes. And finally, 5. Mastering organizational chemistry. All right, let's kick things off with section 1, the chemistry of engagement. The core goal here is to literally apply psychological theory. We aren't just memorizing textbook terms for a trivia night, right? The whole intent is to purposefully use behavioral science as a mechanism to build vital connections. It's all about taking established scientific principles and wielding them as actual relationship-building tools right there on the office floor.
Moving right along to section 2, the push and pull equation.
Now, if we're treating engagement like a science, we obviously need a way to measure it. And this brilliantly illustrates how the module frames this, using two opposing forces, supply push factors versus demand pull factors. Think of these as the fundamental variables in our grand scientific experiment. On one side, you've got the forces pushing supply. That's the energy, the resources, the motivation being injected into the workplace. And then on the flip side, you have the demand pull. Those are the requirements, the daily stresses, and the everyday friction that basically pulls on an employee's capacity. Let's see how this builds into a master formula. Engagement is achieved specifically when those supply push factors outweigh the demand pull factors. It is elegant, it's simple, and it makes total sense. If the pull of daily demands is heavier than the push of the resources supplied, well, engagement just fails. But the moment you tip the scales, the literal second your supply push is greater than your demand pull, engagement becomes the inevitable scientific result. Which brings us to section 3, the psychological toolkit. So how do we actively tip those scales? We start with status quo bias. This is basically the human preference for things to remain exactly the same. By understanding how people naturally resist change, participants learn to introduce new relationship-building strategies gradually, rather than completely upending routines. This prevents unnecessary friction and ultimately formulates much better organizational chemistry. Next up in the toolkit is loss aversion. This is a targeted behavioral concept where the pain of losing something is psychologically twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining the exact same thing. In practice, this means framing a team initiative not just around what can be gained, but by really highlighting the shared success or the team connection that you risk losing if you don't collaborate. It's a hugely powerful way to drive engagement. Then we have discounting. This is the psychological principle of how individuals value immediate rewards way more than future ones. Knowing this, managers can actually engineer immediate positive micro-interactions. Think real-time praise for a job well done, right in the moment, rather than waiting 6 months for a distant annual review. That builds relational chemistry instantly. So the crucial point is how all these concepts work together, which leads us to our fourth tool, framing. This strategic concept shows how the way we present information completely alters someone's perception of it. For instance, framing a challenging project as a team learning opportunity rather than a mandatory high-stakes deadline completely shifts how the team engages with the work. Finally, we have anchoring. This is how initial information establishes the baseline for all subsequent interactions, and it secures higher satisfaction overall. Basically, setting a remarkably positive, supportive tone in the very first 5 minutes of a meeting anchors the entire team's mood, ensuring that the rest of the collaboration is measured against that really strong starting point. Let's look at the results in Section 4, Formulating Positive Outcomes.
So, what actually happens when this chemistry experiment succeeds? Well, the source text promises 4 distinct organizational reactions from applying this psychological strategy: positive attitudes, positive intentions, positive behaviors, and significantly higher levels of job satisfaction. It draws a direct causal line from using that behavioral science toolkit straight to a healthier, much more productive workplace.
And our final section, Section 5, Mastering Organizational Chemistry. The ultimate goal of all this is that participants learn how to create chemistry in the organization. This is absolutely the vital takeaway for us today. Chemistry isn't just something that miraculously happens to an organization. According to this behavioral science approach, it is something you purposefully and methodically engineer.
So I challenge you to look at your own workplace as a laboratory today. Which psychological element will you use to formulate your team's chemistry tomorrow? Are you going to analyze the push and pull factors, or perhaps apply a little understanding of loss aversion? The science is right there waiting to be used. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, happy experimenting!